Okay, welcome to the Rapido monthly update for the month of May. My name is Megan Weldon, and I'm taking over the webinar this month for Judith. Okay, as usual, we'll cover the topics starting first with the Rapido community, then we'll cover the Rapido May release, and then we'll move to frequently asked questions, and we'll have time for your questions. So you'll be able to put those into the chat, and we'll work through your questions at the end of the webinar today. Thinking about the Rapido community, I'd like to welcome Florida Gulf Coast University for going live and joining the community. So you'll start seeing requests from them, and you'll start seeing your requests go to them. Additionally, with the community for this month, another big thing for our Rapido community for May is going to be the ELUNA conference. So I'm very excited to see so many Rapido sessions, both for and by the community. So if you're at ELUNA, I'll see you at these sessions, and I encourage you to check them out. It's a pretty full schedule, I would say, for Rapido sessions here. Additionally, if you want to set up time for us to meet in person at ELUNA, please send an email to both Judith and myself so we can get our schedules coordinated to make sure that we see you while we're there. If you don't reach out to us to schedule a time, I look forward to just bumping into you as we all enjoy the conference and check out the great Rapido sessions. Another thing for our community is another conference coming up, the International Group for Ex Libris Users. The conference is currently still accepting proposals through May 21st, and it's a hybrid conference. So you can still submit presentation proposals for this conference, or you can start registering to attend as well. So that's another thing coming up with a deadline May 21st for presentation proposals. Okay. That acknowledges the community topics for this month, and so let's get into the release highlights for our May release. So a few of the main items pertain to your staff experience working within Rapido, so they'll all be kind of staff-centric focused developments. So first off, we had the creation of borrowing alerts. Previously, we just had the configuration for managing Rapido alerts, but now that's been parsed out to support both the creation of borrowing alerts and further developments of lending alerts and further developments of the borrowing alerts. So with the creation of borrowing alerts, we have an alert for you that you can start using with the May release. So you saw with the April release that we fixed that when a patron cancels a request, the request wouldn't go on to new lenders. Now with this alert in the May release, your workflow can support you in identifying requests that patrons have canceled but are already in transit. So you can configure that alert, and you can also make a set on it. Using the alert, staff can also have the pop-up notice upon doing the receiving action to indicate to staff that the request has been canceled by the patron and is thus ready to be routed back and returned to the partner. Another aspect of the May release is you'll see the good riddance of unused labels. This has been something that we've been asked about a lot, so I'm excited to see it here in May. We know that labels are really easy to make, which is great, but you might have 3 versions, some with typos of the same label approved, or whatever various human errors we might make in creating labels. So come the May release, you'll find that any label that is not applied to a request or connected via a set parameter or within a mediation rule, that label will now drop off of your list of labels in your drop-down list. So that should really tidy up your experience in using labels. Hopefully, you'll see that unused labels drop out, so it's faster for you to drop down through the list and apply a label that you do utilize. So I think if you want a label gone that is still showing up, it means it's still attached to a request, a set, or a mediation rule. So I would look for it there. If you don't see it in your sets or mediation rules, obviously you can use your set filters to try to on that label to find requests with that label, to remove the label off of those requests to then get that label out of your hair, out of your list there. Okay. Another aspect of the May release is the use of the address from field in the letter. The address from field allows a library to determine which email address the email is or the emailed letter is coming from. So typically the letter is associated with your general library contacts, but instead using the address from field can determine which one it is coming from. In order for this functionality to work, you do have to set a parameter to true, and you can see that configuration routing pathway there, configuration fulfillment, general other settings. You're going to find the use address from letter parameter and set that parameter to true in order to be able to use this functionality. Then within your letter itself, you can determine what address you want to see in the letter. So a common example might be using a query to patron letter. Perhaps you want your query to patron letters to come from, and thus the email reply responses from your patrons to come from your resource sharing central department or central address instead of your library's general contact information. So that would be a good example of the letter that you might want to update it in. Something to note, though, there's a big long list of letters that this can be configured in. There are 3 of them. The external obtained letter, the query to patron letter, and the Rapido member letter, where within the XSL template of the letter itself, within the body of the letter, you'll see that the signature email address, which is the field of your kind of default email, also shows in the text of the letter. So if you want to change the address from field in the letter, you can do that on the configurations displayed on our last slide, but you also might want to consider changing the text in your XSL for the letter template itself. So that way then your users don't see a from address at the top of the letter, but then within the body of the letter see a different email address. That could be a bit confusing. So that's something to consider in supporting consistency for your end users. Okay, so those were our larger May release items, but there are a few other things that I want to acknowledge that are coming with the May release that I know some of you have asked about or have been waiting for. So I want to cover those for you. You'll also see all of these things in the May release notes, but here we go. A few things related to the staff experience for the May release is that in the new layout of the resource sharing borrowing requests, it was not possible to override blocks and renewals on renewal requests. This has been fixed. It's now possible to override blocks in this cases in this view. Additionally, on the right pane of lending requests, you can now edit within that pane again. And something else to note is the not equals operator is not relevant for the label input parameter in your mediation rules. So when you're configuring mediation rules, you'll no longer see the not equals operator, and instead you're going to see the not enlist operator because that is the operator that is useful in making that rule work the way you want it to. So you might want to check out your mediation rules. Another aspect of the May release is that the general messages, you can now dismiss them, or the dismiss functionality is now available to you in that split screen view. Previously, it was not working from this view, so now you have that action back available to you in that split view. A couple things related to the patron experience. So expired files will no longer show inactive in the patron account. The files will be removed once they are expired. So that's a positive for our user experience there. Files will also stay active in the patron account for the length of term and determined by the library. So that is determined by you within your configuration. So just to note that those configurations that you have in place will now be effective. So if you haven't looked at those configurations, you might want to check to see that they are matching what you want your end user experience to be. So if you want them visible, the files visible for 90 days, maybe you set that parameter to 90 days. Or just check that it is whatever value you want it to be. So that covers our release portion for our May update. I wanted to dive into a few questions that have come up through conversations with you. So I really appreciate the opportunities to meet with all of you. And if you feel like we haven't connected recently, please feel welcome to reach out and we will get a meeting scheduled to keep working through any questions you might have. And I'm happy to support you in whatever ways I can with your Rapido experience. So let's dive into a few things from that have come up with questions from you. Okay, so statuses are now documented. You'll see that you can find statuses documentation on their various pages. So we've got the borrowing statuses obviously on the Managing Rapido borrowing request page, and we have lending statuses on the Managing Rapido lending request page. So thank you for this question and to my team for working through definitions on these. Another question that I have gotten is about hiding the resource sharing for user groups. So it's possible to hide your resource sharing for user groups. Say they don't have resource sharing privileges, you want to hide that so they don't even get the no Rapido offer message. It's just less visual stuff for them to be seeing when it's not relevant to them. So it'll be useful for a complete user group under your configurations of resource sharing, hide get it from other locations. And then you'll have your drop down box where you can select your user group or you can also select the checkbox hide section when user is not logged in. And that's what it'll look like for you. And then based on your designation, those end users will now have a more streamlined discovery experience relevant to the services that are available to them. You will not have that resource sharing offers when it's not, or the no offers available lines when it's not relevant to their user group. Okay, another piece that has come up is a potential configuration change that you might want to consider. It's been implemented by some libraries, and some Rapido libraries have been asking about it. Um, and the libraries who've implemented it have found that it reduces locate failed. So you may want to consider this choice at your library. The configuration is to select prefer uResolve or locate results, and this changes how the system is searching for a result. Something for you to consider is that this uResolver configuration does need to be checked if you have a centrally managed resources in order to find things in the collections that are managed centrally. Okay. Um, Another lending thing for you is note with the March release, the availability and requestability of items for Rapid ILL are now being checked. So we got a few support cases that things were behaving differently for Rapid ILL, and that's as expected with the March release. So we wanted to acknowledge this again so that you're all familiar with it. The requests are checking the resource sharing library configurations to auto reject when no items are available or when the terms of use show no requestable items. So this this configuration is something that you might already have in place, but it wasn't taken into account for your Rapid ILL requests. Now you might want to consider what this configuration looks like for you. And you might want to look into to see if you have your request terms of use to be requestable for digital resource sharing. And if you want it to reject requests when you don't have an available item, under your lending setup section, you can select to reject when no available items, because RapidILL knows you hold something, but it doesn't necessarily know whether or not the item is available. So you can choose to have that reject for you. Okay. One more item related to lending here, or I guess the rest of my items are lending, so maybe I shouldn't say that. But our next lending frequently asked question is relating to adding a physical lending policy. So you might find that some libraries may be manually adding a partner to your request. For example, if a request yields as unfulfilled and they're doing all that they can to get it filled, they might decide to manually add a partner that they know has it. And the manual application of a partner uses these terms that you define in this by adding physical lending policy rather than your pod terms. So though you may participate in a pod with that library, whether it's the US pod or the Australia pod or a more regionally specific pod, that if the request isn't routed through the pod, it's not going to be using the pod terms. And so you'll want to have this piece configured here to apply for the terms to be applying to the request. And that supports the library who wants to borrow from you when they choose you manually as a lender. Right. Our next thing that I wanted to acknowledge is that a few releases back, I don't remember when now, you can configure to prevent accidental returns. And so this has been asked about quite a bit recently. So you can configure a pop-up message so that when your lending staff are doing the scan in action, if they scan it once and they accidentally scan it again, instead of the item automatically returning and being considered then kind of completed before it even made it to its destination, you can configure this pop-up that lets your staff know that, or lets you know if you're the one doing it, that it completing this action will result in completing the lending request. Do you want to do that? Yes or no? Confirm or cancel? So that is there for you to configure if you so wish to help you with not accidentally returning things before they've even made it out. So those were the things that I wanted to cover with our May release. I welcome you to email Judith or I if you have questions. Also, please put something in the chat if you've got a question that you would like to cover now. And if you'll be at the ELUNA conference, I really look forward to seeing you there. And I hope that you can reach out to Judith and I if you want to meet with us in person at the ELUNA conference. I'm going to stop sharing now so it's easier for me to see the chat. Okay. We see the comment that no CLC is a super cute title. So yes, I look forward to that ELUNA session there. And Jill, I get a question from Jill. Can we share the slides, specifically the FAQs? Yes, the recordings of these webinars are always posted on our monthly webinars page. So where you go to register for these, we always put the link next to it after we've recorded it. So everything is shared. And then everything that it goes in these webinars is documented on our website too. Okay, I have a question about the labels. Essentially, um, I don't know if I can get into the specifics of your question because I don't think I know the actual um, the full details of that. Sorry, I can email you, Rachel, to get to the full details of your question. But yeah, if you create a label and you don't have it associated with a request or a set or a mediation rule, my understanding is that it will not be visible. It will drop out of your available labels. So that is something to consider. Is if you aren't going to be using the label yet, you might not want to be just making them because that might be not a great use of your time if the labels are just going to disappear after your creation if you are not, again, if they are not associated with a request itself or a set or a mediation rule. Okay, you're also interested in the slides. Yeah, I can I know the recordings will be available. I can talk to Judith to see if there's a place that we could post the slides separate from the recordings. But I know the recordings are connected to the website already, and all of the content is documented. And the May release or our frequently asked questions are documented, typically in the frequently asked questions parts of our website too. And I see that somebody else has already posted uh, the website where we post these recordings, so thank you for that. I'm sorry, it's hard to get through these questions. It's kind of slow in small view here. Um, yeah, Amy, I see your question about being able to configure the text of the pop-up message. At this time, that message is not configurable. It's a default message there. And then Christina, you're asking about the pathway to configure the preventing the accidental returns. Let me get back to you. I don't know it off the top of my head. Okay. Oh, and I see that you've answered your own question. There we go. Um, Alma Alma configuration fulfillment, physical fulfillment, scan in messages configuration. There you go. That should have definitely been on the slide. Thank you, Christina. Okay. If there are any other questions, I'll wait for those to come in. Otherwise, thank you for joining us for the May update. And if you're at ELUNA again, I look forward to seeing you then. Okay, I'll just hang tight for a minute to see if any questions are coming in while you're typing them. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.